She looked at me, smiled that cold, detached smile, and said it. "You'll get affection when I feel like it." Then she went right back to scrolling her phone, nails tapping like she was scoring points on some invisible scoreboard. I stood there in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. It wasn't the words that hit me. It was the tone, casual, confident, final. The kind of tone that comes from someone who believes they can't lose you. I didn't argue. I didn't sigh or roll my eyes. I just smiled, calm, unbothered, almost grateful. Because for the first time, I finally understood exactly where I stood. That night, she climbed into bed like nothing happened, rolled away from me. Her back, as usual, a silent wall between us. She fell asleep scrolling through her phone, blue light washing over her face, while I stared at the ceiling. Not angry, not hurt, just clear. I realized something. She didn't take my silence as distance. She took it as submission. She thought she'd won. But she didn't notice the moment I stopped playing the game. In the morning, I didn't make her coffee. Didn't ask if she wanted almond milk or cream, like I always did. I just left the house before sunrise, grabbed a black coffee from Starbucks, and sat in my car. I watched the sky lighten over the parking lot, the world waking up, and thought, this is peace. Not the kind she preaches on her yoga podcasts. Real peace. The kind that comes when you stop begging to be seen. I started small. Quiet adjustments. She liked control, so I gave it to her. All of it. I stopped reminding her about bills. Stopped fixing things around the house. When she asked if I'd seen her charger, I just said, haven't noticed, and walked away. When she came home to an empty fridge, she frowned like something was wrong with the universe. But I didn't apologize. She wanted independence. I was giving her the full experience. At work, I stayed late. Hit the gym afterward. The guys there barely spoke. Just the sound of weights, sweat, silence. Perfect. I started wearing cologne again, something clean and subtle. Not for her. For me. One night, I came home late, wearing a new shirt that actually fit. She was sitting on the couch, wine glass in hand. Netflix paused on some reality show she used to binge. "You're late," she said, eyes sharp, testing. "Didn't realize there was a curfew," I answered, hanging my jacket. She blinked, thrown off. I didn't wait for her reply. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and left it at that. The next morning, she stood at the counter with her coffee, watching me. "You've been quiet lately," she said. I smiled. Yeah, that was it. Just one word. Simple. Empty. Powerful. That night, I didn't go straight home. Drove along the coast with the windows down, the cold air flooding in, my phone buzzing with unread texts I didn't feel like answering. I stopped at a gas station, grabbed a Coke, leaned against my car, and looked at my reflection in the glass door. For the first time in years, I didn't see the man she'd trained me to be. I saw someone coming back to life. She thought she owned my silence. She had no idea what it would feel like when I turned it against her. And that was just the beginning. She didn't notice it right away. Maybe she thought my silence was temporary, a phase I'd grow out of once I'd cooled off. But silence, when it's deliberate, has a way of expanding. It seeps into everything. The kitchen, the living room, the spaces between footsteps. Within a week, our house didn't sound like a home anymore. It sounded like a waiting room. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning. She was standing by the counter, scrolling through her phone, talking about something work-related. Normally, I'd nod, add a small comment just to keep her rhythm going. That morning, I didn't. I rinsed my mug, placed it in the sink, and walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind me landed like a full stop. When I got home that evening, she was dressed differently. Hair curled, perfume lingering faintly in the air. Not the soft floral kind she used to wear, but something sharper, more performative. A bottle of red wine sat on the table, 2 glasses beside it. She smiled, that same practiced smile. She said she thought we could have dinner together, like old times. I told her I'd already eaten. She laughed lightly, but I could see her hand tremble as she lifted the glass. I didn't argue. I just sat across from her for a minute, scrolling through my phone the way she used to, like the person across the table didn't matter. It was strange watching her sit in the silence she'd once built for me. She shifted in her seat, eyes flicking toward me every few seconds, waiting for something. A joke, a question, a hint that the old version of me was still in there somewhere. He wasn't. I'd started spending more time outside the house. Sometimes I'd drive for hours with no destination, the hum of the highway louder than any conversation we ever had. Sometimes I'd stop at a small diner, order a black coffee and a slice of pie, and just sit there watching people. There was a kind of peace in anonymity, being seen by strangers who didn't expect anything from me. She texted me that night. "You didn't say good night." I looked at the message for a full minute before locking my phone. No reply. By Thursday, she'd started reaching for me again, subtle things, brushing her fingers against my arm, making small talk over breakfast, laughing a little too loudly at things that weren't funny. Each attempt was like watching someone rehearse warmth. But you can't fake gravity once it's gone. That weekend, I went out again. Gym, laundry, groceries. She asked if I wanted to grab lunch together. I told her maybe next time. Her voice cracked when she said, "Sure." The silence was finally hers now. And I could tell. She hated how heavy it felt. The shift didn't happen all at once. It came quietly, like a fog rolling in at dawn, slow, steady, impossible to ignore once it settled. She began watching me more than she spoke to me. I'd feel her eyes trace me when I moved through the room, trying to decode the version of me she no longer recognized. That amused me, in a quiet way. Because the truth was, she didn't just lose control, she lost the script. For years, she'd been the one setting the tempo. Now, she couldn't find the rhythm. One evening, I came home from the gym later than usual. The house was too clean, too quiet. The table was set, candles, real silverware, a bowl of pasta steaming in the center. She was sitting there in a dress I hadn't seen since our anniversary 2 years ago. She smiled, small and careful, and said she thought we could have dinner together. I told her I wasn't hungry. Her face didn't fall right away, but her shoulders did. She asked if everything was okay. I said it was. Nothing more. The silence that followed was heavy enough to fill the room. She tried again, talking about her day, her clients, the kind of meaningless details people use when they're desperate to sound normal. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt, didn't respond. Just let her words hang in the air until she ran out of them. When she did, she stared at me, waiting. I looked up, smiled politely, and said I had an early morning. Then I walked upstairs. The next day, she texted me from work. A short message, almost hesitant. She said she missed how we used to talk. I stared at the screen for a while, then typed back. "Yeah, things change." That was it. She didn't reply. By Friday, the tension was visible. She lingered near me, inventing reasons to be in the same room. Folding laundry I'd already folded. Asking questions she didn't care about the answers to. I could feel the panic underneath her calm tone. The fear of irrelevance. The realization that the distance she created wasn't a wall she could hide behind anymore. It was a canyon she couldn't cross. That night, I sat in the living room, scrolling through emails on my MacBook, a cold bottle of Heineken sweating on the table beside me. She walked in quietly, barefoot, eyes red around the edges. She stood there for a long time before saying she didn't like how things felt between us. I told her I didn't like pretending anymore. No shouting, no sarcasm, just the truth, stripped bare. She didn't answer. She just turned and left the room. But I knew right then, for the first time, she was scared. Not of losing the marriage, but of losing her grip on me. And that fear? That was the beginning of her unraveling. It was the small things that gave her away. The nervous tapping of her nails against her coffee mug in the morning. The way she started checking her phone, then setting it down without unlocking it. The way she laughed louder around other people now, like she was trying to prove something. I watched it all quietly. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse. I just observed. Because the moment you stop reacting, people reveal exactly who they are. A week passed, then two. Her new energy wasn't happiness. It was panic disguised as confidence. She tried to reclaim control in the only way she knew, by pretending she didn't care. She posted more, smiled wider, captioned everything with lines about new beginnings and self-love. I didn't comment, didn't ask who was taking the photos. The silence from me said enough. She came home late one Friday, smelling faintly of someone else's cologne, not strong, just enough to notice. She looked surprised to find me awake, sitting in the living room with the TV on mute. She froze, waiting for me to ask where she'd been. I didn't. I just nodded once and went back to scrolling through my phone. That reaction, or lack of one, cut deeper than any argument could have. The next morning, she was up early, making pancakes. Something she hadn't done in months. She talked too fast, too bright. Asked if I wanted to go to the lake that weekend, just like old times. I said I had plans. She asked what kind of plans. I said the kind that didn't need explaining. She laughed softly, but it wasn't real. It was the sound of someone trying not to fall apart. That night, I went out. Just a drive, a drink at a quiet bar downtown. The kind of place with soft lighting and old vinyls spinning behind the counter. I sat there, sipping bourbon, listening to the low hum of conversation. I didn't flirt. Didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't looking for validation. I was simply existing, something I hadn't done in years. When I got home, she was waiting in the dark. No words. Just the sound of her breathing unevenly. She said she didn't like how distant I'd become. That she didn't recognize me anymore. I told her maybe that was the problem. She never really did. Her face twisted like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just stood there, staring at me like a stranger. That night, she cried quietly in bed. Thought I didn't hear. I did, but I didn't move. I let her feel the silence she'd created. Let her understand what it means when indifference finally turns inward. She thought I was punishing her. I wasn't. I was simply done holding together something that was already broken. The next few weeks were a quiet unraveling. She tried to pretend everything was fine, but it was written in the way she moved. Slower. Hesitant. Like someone walking through a dream that's turning into a nightmare. She used to glide through the house like she owned it. Now she lingered in doorways, glancing at me as if asking permission to exist in the same space. I didn't grant it. I didn't deny it. I just carried on as if she were a ghost passing through. Her attempts grew clumsy. One night, she came home with takeout from that Thai place she used to love, the one we'd gone to on our anniversaries before everything started falling apart. She set it out on the table like a peace offering. She said she missed this. I asked what exactly she missed. She didn't have an answer. Her eyes dropped to her plate. I told her to eat before it got cold and walked out to the porch. Outside, the air was cool, quiet. I sat there with a glass of whiskey, watching the neighborhood lights flicker. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped. The silence, the distance, they didn't suffocate anymore. They steadied me. It's strange how peace can sound like absence. The next morning, she was different. She tried to make herself smaller somehow. Soft voice, cautious steps, everything rehearsed. She said she wanted to understand what was happening to us. I told her nothing was happening. That was the truth. Nothing was left to happen. The story had already ended. She just hadn't realized it yet. She started asking where I was going, who I was seeing. Questions that used to sound like control now came out like fear. I didn't lie. I just didn't elaborate. If I said I was going out, that was all she got. The mystery wasn't for her benefit. It was for mine. Watching her imagination twist in the silence she once weaponized, it was poetic. One night, she came into the living room and sat next to me. Not close, but close enough. She said she didn't like who she'd become. She said she wanted to start over. I didn't look at her. I said, starting over usually requires something worth saving. The silence that followed was sharp. She sat there for a long time before getting up and walking away. That was the night I packed a small bag. Just a few things. Nothing dramatic. No threats, no scenes. I left it by the door and slept soundly for the first time in months. She thought my distance was temporary. But what she didn't know, I had already begun disappearing for good. It was early Saturday morning when I finally left. No scene, no confrontation. Just quiet movement, the way you step out of a room where someone's sleeping. She was still in bed, one arm thrown across the empty space beside her, the same space she'd created months ago. I looked at her once, not with anger, not even sadness. Just clarity. Then I picked up my bag and walked out. The front door closed with the softest click, but to me, it sounded like thunder. I didn't go far at first. I stayed in a small Airbnb by the water, nothing fancy. A worn couch, a half-stocked kitchen, a view of the ocean through fogged windows. It was enough. I made coffee, sat by the window, and let the silence wrap around me. For the first time in years, it wasn't heavy. It was healing. I wasn't running away from her. I was returning to myself. 2 days later, she called. Once. Then again. Then 10 more times. I didn't answer. Her text came next, short, confused, emotional. She said she didn't understand what was happening, that she just wanted to talk. I read them all, one by one, then put my phone face down on the table. She wanted clarity, but she never offered it when I needed it. Now she could sit with the same uncertainty she'd fed me. That evening, I took a walk along the boardwalk. The air smelled like salt and rain. I passed a small cafe, the kind with old jazz playing from hidden speakers and a neon sign flickering open in soft red light. I sat down, ordered a burger and a Coke, and watched people move around me. No expectations, no tension, just motion. It hit me then. I wasn't missing her. I was missing the version of myself I used to be before I started shrinking to fit her moods. The next morning, I turned off location sharing, shut down the joint bank card, and rerouted the bills. She wanted freedom, autonomy, independence. Now she had all three. The irony wasn't lost on me. By the end of the week, I got an email, her words measured, polite, desperate between the lines. She said she wanted to meet, to talk things through. I stared at it for a long time, then hit delete. That night, I stood on the balcony, watching the waves break against the shore. My phone buzzed once more, then went still. I didn't even check who it was. I just whispered to myself what she'd never understood. Sometimes disappearing isn't about revenge. It's about peace. And peace, once you find it, doesn't negotiate. A week passed before she found out where I was. I don't know how. Maybe through the shared insurance. Maybe through a friend who couldn't keep quiet. I was sitting on the porch of the Airbnb, coffee in hand, when her car pulled up. Same car I used to wash for her every Sunday morning while she slept in. She stepped out slowly, eyes searching, body language fragile in a way I'd never seen before. She didn't look like the woman who once said she didn't need anyone. She looked like someone who'd finally realized what that actually meant. She said my name softly, like testing a word she hadn't spoken in years. I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. She started talking fast, about how she'd been wrong, how she missed me, how things could be different now. I listened, but not the way she wanted me to. I wasn't hanging on her words. I was studying them, measuring the distance between her tone and her truth. She said she hadn't been herself lately. I almost laughed. That's the thing about people. They always say they weren't themselves when the consequences arrive. But every choice still felt deliberate when she made it. I told her I wasn't angry. She blinked, confused. Anger would have been something she could still work with, something to fight against. But I wasn't giving her that. I was calm. I was finished. She asked if we could at least have dinner, just talk. I told her maybe someday. She looked at me like that word was a knife. Someday meant never, and she knew it. After she left, I sat there for a while, watching her taillights disappear down the road. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. It felt like the first deep breath after years of holding it in. That night, I got a message from a mutual friend. She'd been asking around, telling people she was trying to make things right. I didn't respond. Let her have the story. Let her play the victim in conversations I'd never hear. Because I finally understood something she never would. Walking away isn't weakness. It's strategy. The next morning, I went for a run along the beach. The sun was coming up, the world painted gold and blue. My lungs burned, my body ached, but it felt good, alive, clean, earned. When I stopped, I looked out at the horizon and realized something that settled deep in my chest. She wasn't my loss. She was my lesson. And some lessons are worth every ounce of silence it takes to learn them. It didn't take long for the silence to reach her world. Friends stopped calling her as much. Her posts, the ones about freedom, healing, self-love, started getting fewer likes, fewer comments. The same people who once cheered for her independence now whispered that she'd gone too far. I didn't have to say a word. Her own reflection was doing the work for me. A month after I left, I saw her by accident. Grocery store. Middle of the day. She was standing in the frozen aisle, staring at something but not really seeing it. When she noticed me, her entire posture changed. She smiled, that familiar, overly bright smile people wear when they're terrified of looking broken. She said I looked good. I thanked her, politely, like you would a stranger. She asked how I'd been. I told her life was simple now. Peaceful. She laughed nervously, said she was happy for me, but her eyes betrayed her. They flickered with disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend that I'd actually moved on without theatrics. That night, she texted me again. She said she missed the way we used to laugh. I read it, then deleted it. There was nothing left to say. She wanted to reopen a door I'd already sealed shut. The thing about walking away quietly is that it leaves people haunted. They can't point to a moment, a fight, a last word. They can't convince themselves they were right. They're left replaying everything, searching for clues, wondering when the air started to change. That's what she was living in now, the endless loop of her own what-ifs. A mutual acquaintance told me later that she'd started skipping work, that she was going through something. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to know. Some storms are meant to be weathered alone. Meanwhile, my life had become beautifully boring. Mornings with black coffee and a run by the shore. Work that didn't feel like obligation. Evenings with silence that didn't sting. I'd stopped checking my phone altogether. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It just filled the space where chaos used to live. Sometimes, when I thought about her, I felt a faint echo, not longing, not regret, just acknowledgement. She was a chapter, not a sentence. A lesson written in arrogance and silence. She thought love was control, but real love is presence. And once you stop being present, you lose everything. She taught me that without ever realizing it. And in the end, that was her legacy. The woman who mistook indifference for power and didn't notice until she was standing alone, holding everything that no longer mattered. It was late autumn when she reached out again. The message came at night, just one line. She said she finally understood. No explanations. No apologies. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. There was a time when those words would have undone me, when I would have driven through the night to hear her say them in person. But not now. Understanding meant nothing when it arrived after the damage was done. I didn't respond. Some truths don't need witnesses. I saw her one more time, a few weeks later. A mutual friends gathering. She hadn't expected me to show up. The look on her face said it all. Shock, regret, and something else. Fear, maybe. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. Her confidence, that bright defiance she once wore like armor, had dimmed. When our eyes met, she smiled carefully and said it was good to see me. I told her she looked well. It was a lie, but a kind one. Throughout the evening, I caught her watching me. Every time I laughed, every time someone asked me a question, I felt her attention clinging to me like static. She wanted to know if I was still hers in some way, if she could still affect me. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And that, more than anything, terrified her. When I left, she followed me out to the parking lot. She asked if we could talk. Her voice trembled in that way people's voices do when they already know the answer. I told her I didn't think there was anything left to say. She said she'd changed. I told her I believed her, but change doesn't rewrite history. It just adds a footnote. She looked at me then, really looked, and said quietly that she never thought I'd actually leave. I told her that was her mistake. She mistook silence for weakness. But silence, when it's chosen, is power. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the asphalt. For a moment, neither of us moved. She wanted a reaction, something to hold on to. I gave her the only thing she couldn't fight, indifference. Then I turned, got in my car, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw her still standing there, frozen in place. A figure outlined by streetlight and regret. And I knew then, she wasn't just losing me. She was losing the version of herself that existed when I still cared. And that kind of loss, it doesn't heal. It lingers. I never saw her again after that night. There were no more calls, no more texts, no desperate messages asking where it all went wrong. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the end of a storm. For months, I'd lived waiting for some final confrontation, some moment of closure, but it never came. And maybe that was the closure itself, the absence. Life became simple again. Mornings with sunlight leaking through the blinds, black coffee in a chipped mug, music humming low in the background. I moved into a smaller apartment near the coast. Nothing fancy, one bedroom, white walls, a view of the water if you leaned just right. But it was mine. Everything in that space felt deliberate. The calm, the order, the peace. I didn't realize how heavy my old life had been until I set it down. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk along the shore. The air always colder there, sharp enough to make you feel awake. I'd think about how she once said she felt trapped, how she needed space, freedom, independence. And she got all of it. The universe gave her exactly what she asked for, a life without me in it. People still ask what happened between us. I don't give them details. I just say, we grew in different directions. It's simpler that way. They nod, assuming it was mutual, peaceful, mature. They'll never know the truth, that the real end wasn't in anger or betrayal, but in realization. The moment I understood that love shouldn't feel like convincing someone to see your worth. One afternoon, months later, I saw her again by accident. She was sitting alone at a cafe, hair tied back, a paperback open in front of her. For a second, our eyes met. She smiled, small, hesitant, like someone approaching a memory. I nodded once, polite, distant. Then I turned away. No conversation. No nostalgia. Just peace. Walking away wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. She thought she'd broken me, but all she did was strip away everything that wasn't real. What was left was quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove a point. As I stood outside, the wind off the ocean hit my face, and for the first time, I felt nothing but calm. No anger, no ache, no weight. Just stillness. And that's when I realized the truth that had been waiting all along. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected.